Listen to me and listen very carefully. What I am about to tell you is the single most important intelligence briefing of your lifetime, and I can guarantee you right now, the mainstream media, those talking heads at the Pentagon's beck and call, will never, ever tell you the truth of what happened in the last 24 hours. They can't. To tell you the truth would be to admit that the United States of America has just suffered the most humiliating military defeat since the fall of Saigon, perhaps in our entire history. The American century is over. It didn't end with a whimper. It ended in a roar of rocket engines and the scream of twisted steel. As I speak to you, the pride of the United States Navy, our multi-billion dollar carrier strike groups, are not patrolling. They are not projecting power, and they are certainly not maintaining stability. They are fleeing. They are running at flank speed, burning through their engines to escape a kill zone that has been slammed shut by a tripartite alliance, the likes of which the world has never seen. I'm Scott Ritter. I've spent my life in the belly of the beast. I was a Marine Corps intelligence officer. I was a UN weapons inspector. I have walked the ground in the Middle East and sat in the rooms where the unthinkable is discussed as a matter of strategy. I'm telling you, the unthinkable just went kinetic. 2,000 missiles, a coordinated, synchronized saturation strike from Iran, Russia, and China, just turned the Persian Gulf into a graveyard of American dreams. If you think this is hyperbole, stay with me, because by the time I finish this briefing, you will understand that the world you woke up in this morning no longer exists. How did we get here? For decades, the experts in Washington, the people who haven't spent a single day in a foxhole, told you that Iran was a third-rate power. They told you Russia was a gas station with nuclear weapons. They told you China was an economic partner that would never dare challenge the U.S. Navy. They were wrong on every single count. Remember Operation True Promise? Back in April, Iran launched a wave of drones and missiles. The media laughed. They said, oh, 99% were intercepted. I told you then, and I'm telling you now, that was a massive, high-stakes laboratory experiment. Iran wasn't trying to hit targets. They were mapping the electronic signature of every Aegis destroyer in the region. They were measuring the re-fire rate of our Patriot batteries. They were testing our OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. While the Pentagon was patting itself on the back for defeating a test run, the Triple Alliance was finalizing the Integrated Strike Protocol. They spent the last 6 months sharing data. Russia provided the GLONASS satellite precision. China provided the high-end electronic warfare suites to ghost our radar screens. And Iran? Iran provided the hammer, a domestic missile industry that can produce more ordnance in a week than we can intercept in a year. We've been sleepwalking into a buzzsaw. We thought we were the hunters. We didn't realize that for the last 24 months, we've been the ones in the crosshairs. Now, I want you to visualize what happened at 02:45 hours local time. This is the part they are scrubbing from your social media feeds. This is the part the Pentagon is classifying as top secret to prevent a national panic. Imagine you are on the bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln. You've been told you're the apex predator of the seas. Then suddenly the electronic warfare suites go dark. Not a glitch, a total systemic blackout. China just flipped the switch on the silver cloud jamming system. Your radar screens aren't showing one or two bogeys. They are showing a solid wall of white. 2,000 missiles. Let that number sink in. This wasn't a wave, it was a tidal wave, from the silos in Tabriz, from merchant ships in the Arabian Sea that were actually Russian launch platforms, and from high-altitude Chinese bombers. The sky literally ignited. We are talking about Wave 55 of Operation True Promise 4. We saw the Fata-2 hypersonic missiles, weapons we have no defense against, moving at Mach 15. We saw the Russian Zircons provided to Iranian crews, skimming the wave tops so low that our CIWS guns couldn't even depress far enough to track them. The sound, sailors on the periphery described it as the sound of the atmosphere being ripped in half. It wasn't explosions. It was a continuous deafening roar. Our ships were firing SM-3 interceptors, each one costing you, the taxpayer, $15 million. We fired hundreds of them. And you know what? It didn't matter. You can't stop a hurricane with an umbrella. For the first time since 1945, a U.S. admiral had to give the order of full retrogression. That is the military term for a panicked retreat. Our carriers didn't stay to fight. They turned tail and fled toward the Indian Ocean, leaving our bases, our allies, and our interests to burn in the rearview mirror. The kill zone was established, and the U.S. Navy was evicted from the Persian Gulf in under 90 minutes. But here is what is even more alarming. If you think this is just a naval skirmish, you are missing the forest for the trees. This was a synchronized multi-domain decapitation strike. As the carriers fled, the entire regional architecture collapsed. But that's not even the most shocking part. Stay with me, because what I'm about to say next changes everything. At the exact moment the missiles hit, sleepers across the region activated. U.S. bases in Al Assad and Al Tanf didn't just take fire, they were overwhelmed by a combination of precision drone swarms and specialized kinetic cyber attacks that shut down their communication with Central Command. We were blind, deaf, and dumb while our crown jewels were being chased out of the theater. And then the economic kill switch was pulled. The Strait of Hormuz is now effectively a no-go zone. Iran didn't even have to sink a tanker. They just proved they could sink anything that moves. As I stand here, the global insurance markets for shipping are in a state of absolute cardiac arrest. The price of oil, it didn't go up $5, it's screaming toward $180 a barrel. And where is the U.S. response? Where is the overwhelming force? Silence. The superpowers, Moscow and Beijing, have formed a diplomatic and military phalanx around Tehran. They have signaled that any strike on the Iranian mainland will be met with a symmetrical response against U.S. assets worldwide. We are checked. We are mated. The stakes aren't just climbing. They have reached the stratosphere. We are looking at a global economic collapse triggered by a military defeat that the media is pretending didn't happen. I want you to stay with me right now. I know your instinct is to look away. I know it's easier to go back to watching the news and believing that everything is under control. But I am telling you, as someone who has spent decades analyzing theater-level conflicts, if you leave now, you will be blind to the greatest shift in power since the end of World War II. By the end of this speech, you will understand exactly why your bank account, your gas tank, and your children's future are tied to those carriers fleeing in the dark. They want you to think this is a Middle East problem. It isn't. This is an American survival problem. Having spent years in military intelligence, I can tell you that the Pentagon is currently in wave 4 of a continuity of government protocol. They aren't planning a counterattack, they are planning for the fallout of the defeat. I've seen the red line maps, I've seen what happens when our Aegis shield is shattered. It's not a pretty picture, but you need to see it. You deserve to know the truth that the experts are too cowardly to admit. Why should you believe me? Because I've been the one who was right when everyone else was wrong. When they said Iraq had WMDs, I said they didn't. I was smeared, I was attacked, and I was right. When they said Russia would collapse in 3 weeks in Ukraine, I told you to look at the math. I was right. Now I am looking at the theater level data of the last 24 hours. I am looking at the integrated strike signatures. This level of coordination, the way the Russian Zircons handed off targets to Iranian drones while Chinese satellites jammed U.S. Link 16 data sharing, is a level of sophistication the U.S. military is not prepared to face. We have spent 30 years fighting insurgents in sandals. We forgot how to fight a real war. We spent trillions on stealth fighters that are visible to modern Russian low-frequency radar. We built carriers that are nothing more than $13 billion targets. Our entire military-industrial complex is a Potemkin village. It looks grand from the outside, but one gust of wind or 2,000 missiles, and the whole thing comes crashing down. The U.S. Navy is currently learning a lesson that I've been trying to teach the Beltway boys for a decade. Steel is cheap, physics is real, and the era of American invincibility was a fairy tale we told ourselves to stay asleep. So what happens tomorrow? Let's look at the near inevitability of the next 72 hours. The Triple Alliance will declare a maritime security zone over the Persian Gulf. They will invite friendly nations, India, Brazil, South Africa, to continue trade under their protection. The United States will be left on the outside looking in. Worst case scenario, the petrodollar dies this weekend. If the U.S. Navy cannot guarantee the safety of the oil lanes, the Saudis and the Emiratis have no reason to keep pricing oil in dollars. They've already seen which way the wind is blowing. They saw the carriers flee. They saw the shield fail. We are looking at a dark winter in America. Hyperinflation isn't a risk anymore, it's a mathematical certainty. When the world stops fearing our carriers, they stop buying our debt. And when they stop buying our debt, the American lifestyle, the cars, the electronics, the cheap food, vanishes overnight. This isn't just about a war over there. This is about the war that is coming to your doorstep. This is about the collapse of the rules-based international order that was nothing more than a euphemism for American hegemony. The order just met 2,000 missiles, and the missiles won. Now, I'm going to tell you the most shocking part of this entire ordeal. This is the piece of the puzzle that explains why the White House is paralyzed. This is the payoff I promised you. Why hasn't the U.S. launched a nuclear response? We have the subs. We have the silos. Why are we letting our carriers run like beaten dogs? Because of the silent protocol. My sources inside the intelligence community, men and women who are terrified of what they are seeing, have confirmed that moments after the missile waves began, a direct communication was established between Beijing and Washington. It wasn't a red phone call to de-escalate. It was a gun to the head ultimatum. China informed the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve that if a single American nuclear warhead is armed, China will instantly dump and destroy. They will dump every single cent of the $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds they hold. They will do it simultaneously across every global market. They told us, you can lose your Navy or you can lose your country. You can let the carriers flee or you can watch every ATM in America go dark by noon. That is why there is no counterattack. We are being held hostage by our own debt. The 2,000 missiles were just the physical manifestation of a defeat that happened years ago when we sold our sovereignty to our rivals. The carriers are fleeing because they have no choice. They are fleeing because the United States of America is no longer in control of its own destiny. But don't think for a second that this is the end. This was just the opening salvo. As I speak, Wave 81 is being prepped. Not missiles this time, but a diplomatic surge that will see the BRICS nations officially announce a new gold-backed currency. The carriers are still running. They haven't reached safe water yet. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what happens when the missiles stop flying and the reality of our new diminished place in the world sets in? Stay tuned, stay vigilant, because the mainstream will keep lying to you until the very moment the lights go out. I am Scott Ritter, and I will keep telling you the truth no matter how much it hurts to hear. Keep your eyes on the horizon. The sky is still white, and the old world is burning.